What happens when the woman everyone depends on finally breaks? Well, I can tell you from personal experience that the world keeps turning around you. Everybody just keeps going on, and everything that you think that you are the center of actually just keeps rolling without you. I'm Bronwen Sciortino, and I'm an international author and simplicity expert. And I'll be coming to you each week with just short, really impactful messages that you can use to live your life in a very different way. What happens when the woman everyone depends on finally breaks? Well, I can tell you from personal experience that the world keeps turning around you. Everybody just keeps going on, and everything that you think that you are the center of actually just keeps rolling without you. And I think, when you go through that experience, it's really humbling to understand that despite you thinking that you're holding everything together, everything just keeps happening. And I think one of the biggest lessons that you learn through that process is that you might as well look after yourself now, because when you let yourself become the last thing on the list that gets looked at, everything else is okay, and you're the one that pays the price. Is being the strong one actually one of the most dangerous roles a woman can play? I think there's lots of different ways to look at this question. Being the strong one, being the powerful leader, being, that forceful presence at the front of the team is one way to look at it. I think the strong one can also be pushing through and forcing yourself through different things in life in ways that isn't beneficial for yourself. And I think being the strong one is also aligned often with picking up the pieces and always doing everything for everybody else before you consider the impact on yourself. And I think the answer in all of those situations is that it is absolutely one of the most dangerous roles that a woman can play. We don't have to be everything, do everything, see everything, explore everything, experience everything for everybody else all of the time. Sometimes it's really beneficial for you and for other people to do that. But most of the time, when we do step in and take that load from other people, we can actually be causing them to not learn the lessons that they need to learn in life. And then they're stuck in that spot, experiencing that same thing over and over and over. So in terms of your health and well-being, it's absolutely one of the most dangerous things you can do. That keep going, be strong, keep forcing, keep pushing through. Really, what we need to do is integrate our health and wellness with the work that we do and make it all part of the same holistic environment, and make our health and well-being just as important. And often that means rest, and it means recovery, and it means rejuvenation. And that's just as important as being strong and being able to, hold the fort and hold the line. Okay, if everyone depends on you, have you accidentally taught them that you don't need anyone? Yeah, this is a really interesting question. And I think something I've experienced a lot in life is that people assume that because you appear to have everything together, that you don't need help, and that they don't need to worry about you, and they don't need to step in and support you. And, sometimes that's true, but sometimes you just also need the pat on the shoulder, or that phone call or the text message that says, hey, I'm thinking of you. You don't want to be the one that gives all the time, and then when you actually need something, people just turn their back and walk away. That can be a really difficult part of life and experience in life. But also, I feel like when that happens, it gives you a really strong message about whether or not that person needs to play an important role in your life, and whether or not you need to actually give to them as much as you do when that's not reciprocal. I think I've got to a point where I'm always looking for the win-win. So if I've got someone in my life who I'm constantly chasing, constantly doing, constantly giving to, and I don't get back from them anything ever, then that's not a win-win, that's a win-loss. And I'm the one that's losing, and it's my energy that's going out the door, and becomes really difficult to replace. So I would say look for the win-win, look for the people who care enough to check in and actually do things for you as much as you do things for them. Why do successful women find it so hard to admit I need help? I think whenever you're ticking boxes and standing in a place where you're chasing someone else's agenda for you, you're never going to be aligned with doing the things that are right for you. And while ever you live in that environment, it feels like there's something not quite right. There's something that's wrong. There's something that you're doing that isn't quite making sense. And because we don't necessarily spend a lot of time understanding true leadership, we find ourselves often living a different perspective of leadership than perhaps actually matches who we are. And it's hard to ask for help in that environment because you've spent so much energy getting there and getting the position and holding the fort and leading the team and doing all the things. You don't necessarily spend a lot of time listening to that little voice that says, something's not right. There's something wrong here. There's a gap. There's something you need to fill. There's something somehow you need to grow. And we become focused on what's wrong with us as opposed to where we've landed versus what's right for us. And so I think intuitively we know that asking for help will mean that people will give us information, opportunities, the pathway to keep going in the direction that we're already heading. And we know intuitively that that's not right. So we don't want to ask for help because it's going to push us further down that pathway. The solution to that is to master looking within and working out what it is that you need and where it is you need to be so that you can actually live life differently. At what point does being there for everyone else become abandoning yourself? Whenever you are doing everything for everybody else and making sure that everybody else is okay, the chances are that what you need and where you need to be and what's right for you is so far down the to-do list that it never gets done. We tell ourselves that we'll get to it later. We'll do that tomorrow. But there is no tomorrow because tomorrow quietly becomes today. And that thing for yourself that you really need for you to be okay is still on the bottom of the list and it's still allocated to tomorrow. So we tell ourselves these lies that when we get this project done, when we've looked after that person, when I've done this thing, when I've run around and picked up that thing, we can then look after ourselves. But we don't allow space in our calendar for there to be time to look after ourselves unless we place an importance on our health and well-being and we make that just as important as what everyone else needs. And we coalesce everything together and we say, it's not my health and well-being over here and everything else over here. It's all part of one thing and it all plays an important role. It all has to have an importance placed on it. We have tiny choices in life. We can choose to run down the track where we do everything for everybody else, or we can consciously and deliberately choose, in this moment, I need that glass of water for my hydration. In this moment, I'm going to choose a nourishing snack instead of having that fried thing that I've just picked up because I don't have time and I haven't planned. It becomes abandoning yourself when you run on autopilot and you don't consciously make decisions that are right for you. Have you become so good at being needed that you've forgotten how to be loved? Yeah, I think this is a really important question. We do so much for everybody else and we don't acknowledge that we need to receive as much as we need to give. And we need that love. We need that connection. It might be from nature, from plants, from animals, from people. It could come from all different areas. But we need to consciously and deliberately place ourselves in situations where we can actually receive. And receiving is a different thing to taking. And receiving becomes about allowing your soul to be filled as much as you fill everybody else. That can be difficult when we're in a situation where we feel like we can't ask for help. We can't be seen to be weak by needing somebody else. But it's not weakness. It's connection. And connection is a really important part of life. Who takes care of the strong woman when she can't be strong anymore? Having experienced a complete breakdown because I ignored all the signs along the way. I ignored the voice. I ignored the pain in my body. I ignored everything my mind and my body was telling me along the way. And I got to a point where I was forced to stop. I was dropped. and I couldn't get back up again. And what I learned in that moment is that the people who really care are the ones who are there no matter what's going on. The people who are there because you give them something disappear really quickly. So now in my life, I've got really good at being able to really consciously see who in your life is actually reciprocally giving all the time, not in the bad times, in the good times as well. It's like every day. Who are the people that you hear from? Who are the people that you can call on and say, hey, I need help with this? Because they're the ones that will be there when the chips are down. And they're the ones that you pour your energy into. They're the ones that you create the flow of love, and you create the flow of giving in life, no matter what's going on. And get really conscious about who those people are. And that's where you pour your energy into that connection. Are you actually generous, or are you terrified of letting people down? I think there's a really fine line, and it's really important to know where that line is. So if you're always running around doing things for other people without any conscious thought, and you just say yes because you're needed, then that's very different to being generous. I think the two have merged over time and are seen as the same thing. When you can learn to say no, and say no because you know that it's going to be detrimental to you, that's a really important thing to learn. It's a really important skill to have in your toolkit, because whenever you're saying yes to something that's not right for you, you're giving your energy away, and that energy is really difficult to replace. When you say yes to things that you're aligned to, yes to people that you're aligned to, yes to things that are important to you, then there's a different energy that goes from you, and there's a different energy that comes back to you at the same time. They're not separate acts of having to refuel your energy through that process. So it's really important, if you're a generous person, be discerning with you are generous and how you're generous. So that self as part of that process. What are you secretly resenting people for that you keep volunteering to do? Wow, this is a really interesting question. It's interesting for me because I don't really resent people anymore. I've moved past that judging and criticizing phase. One of the things I noticed when I was putting myself back together was that we're taught to judge and criticize others as a way of working out where we're at in our lives. So it's a comparison thing. And if we can look at someone and say, well, I don't approve of what you're doing, therefore I must be better, or I must be in a better place, or I must have achieved more, or I must have done more self-development, or it's that judging and criticizing that keeps us trapped in a cycle where we're always looking at other people, trying to work out, where we're at in comparison. And I've come to a point where I believe that the judging and the criticism is a distraction. And the distraction is there so that it's a barrier almost to us looking at the things that we need to look at within ourselves. Because the second we start to look at things within ourselves, we start to feel like we have to have an answer. We have to have a reason. We've got to have a story that we can tell about why we're not where we're supposed to be, or why we're not as perfect as we should be. And it's a case of just live and let live. So allow other people to make the choices for their lives, and then you make the choices for your life. And when you make your choices for your life, do it as consciously and deliberately as you can. So in the moment when you're asked to do something, in the moment where something presents in your life and you need to make a decision around something, give yourself a pause so that you've got time to actually make sure that you are consciously connecting with what's happening, and then consciously and deliberately decide what your next step is. If you stopped fixing everyone else's problems tomorrow, who would you be? It's a really interesting thing, from my experience of being dropped and being forced to stop, and going from a highly scheduled environment where every second was triple booked to literally stopping and having no responsibilities, nothing to deliver, nobody to be responsible for, nobody to lead, there was nothing except for me to focus on. And that was really overwhelming and really intense. And I learned a lot about my inner voice, the way that I spoke to myself, the way that I punished myself, the way that I pushed and forced myself through life. And where I've come to is a place where I truly believe in the gentle power that we have within. Whenever you have to force yourself to do something, whenever you have to push through, you are draining energy from an energy tank that's probably already empty, and you are creating a pathway for yourself that isn't supportive and isn't nourishing. And when you believe that your health and well-being has one of the highest importances in your life, you come to understand that forcing and pushing and struggling just does not support health and well-being in a positive environment. So I start to look now, when challenges come up, I'm looking for the struggle, I'm looking for where I'm forcing, I'm looking for where I'm pushing myself. And then I want to find the pathway through that aligns with who I am, that nourishes me, because the ease and grace is where life is this between working and creating. And when I get to be in a creative space, nothing feels like hard work. The creation itself is that connection to life that allows me to live in a very different way. So if you're looking for a different way to live your life, if you're wondering what's next, how do I move from where I am to a place that's really going to support and nourish me, find me in my socials, join my mailing list, and let's move forward together in a way that really supports who you are and what you want to achieve in the world.